and I'm crying out to a God that I do not believe in. And I'm saying, how could this be happening to me? I don't believe in you. I don't believe in this. You could not have picked a more unworthy subject to bestow this kind of grace on. And just for the contrast, before my experience, I was an atheist, a prostitute, a drug addict, an orphan to suicide, a liar, a manipulator, a thief, a racist, a rapist. I was a person who did insanely harmful things to tons of other people. And here I was bestowed with grace and love of the divine. And it just didn't make any sense to me. And as I'm saying to them, I'm not worthy of this. I'm not worthy of this. They're saying back to me, but you're worthy of all the love in the universe.
Betty, thank you so much for being here today. I really, really appreciate it.
So grateful to be here and share space together.
Of course. And I was doing this down here at the same time. That's so funny. So if you want to start by just sharing your experience and we can see where it takes us.
Yeah. So thank you for this space. I'm going to share about my near death-like experience that happened in 2019. But in order for me to properly explain the near-death experience, I have to talk about my life before. So I'll just give you a little snapshot of what my life was like before my experience. The end narrative of that part of my life was that I was a homeless meth head prostitute strung out on heroin. And then I had this really spiritually transformative experience as a result of a drug overdose, and it completely transformed my life. But my life growing up was immersed in poverty and addiction and sexual trauma and emotional and physical trauma. And it was just a very dark experience. Not saying that every second of my life was just misery. It wasn't. I have happy memories from childhood too. But the more darker memories are the ones that really stick out. You know, my parents were both addicts and their addiction progressed over the course of their life. And I just watched them. The pain that they were in was just, it's indescribable. And as their addiction continued to progress, they just became more and more hopeless. And in 2007, it was the height of the Oxycontin epidemic. And my parents were in the same spot that they were all the time. They were about to be evicted. The lights were turned off. The gas was turned off. The phone was turned off. And they were out of pills. And this happened to them every single month with their refills. And they were prescribed over 1,000 pills each every month. It was like this insane, they were doctor shopping and doing all sorts of things and selling pills and taking pills. And they just made this decision that enough was enough. They were sick and tired of being sick and tired. And they decided to end their lives together. They committed suicide together in 2007. And it was, obviously horrendous. My sister and I found them. I was 23. My sister was 18. And they left these notes and they were really brief. And they just basically said to take care of each other, as if a 23-year-old and an 18-year-old would know how to do that. And, I understood what my parents were going through because I was already completely immersed in my own addiction, but I just could have never fathomed what they did and that they did it together. I always knew that my mom was probably going to exit that way because she was just a very unhappy person and she had tried over a dozen times, in the years leading up to the actual completion of suicide. And, but I never could have thought that my dad would do that. And that death it put me into such a deep, dark place because my grief was so overwhelming that I was doing anything that I could to escape the grief. And so for me, my main coping skill was to turn to drugs and alcohol. And not just that, but men and sex and food and just anything to numb myself. What can I do to make me not present in reality? So that's what I did. And I abandoned my sister because hurt people. And I was a traumatized person who decided that I would no longer be a victim to my circumstance. I was going to be the perpetrator because I thought that there was only two roles in life. I thought that it was predator and prey or victim and abuser. I didn't know that there was any other role to play. And so I abandoned my sister and I moved across the country and my addiction became my whole personality. Like I'm covered in tattoos of liquor bottles and packs of cigarettes. I got a naked girl on my arm. It branded me. My addiction became my whole identity. And it came before every relationship. I've been married and divorced a handful of times. No partner was ever more important than my partnership with my addiction, because I had known it my whole life. And in some weird way, I felt like I had to carry out the legacy of my family. And this was the legacy of my family. We're a family of drug addicts. My parents couldn't use anymore. And so I had to use in their honor, in their memory. And so I was planning on living and dying the same way that they did. And in 2019, I died. I lived and died exactly how they did. And I died from a drug overdose. The experience that happened after that was just absolutely life shattering. A whole new identity emerged. But the first part of my experience was a life review. And like I just shared, I was a traumatized person who was maliciously, intentionally traumatizing other people. So my life review was not great. It hurt really bad because I was experiencing all this pain that I had put other people through. And then the pain that I had gone through, and I was experiencing it from both perspectives. And then I started to experience things that didn't happen in this lifetime. Maybe they happened in past lifetimes, or maybe I was going into the awareness of just the earth experience as a whole. But I started to experience childbirth, but I'm not a person who's ever had a child in this lifetime. I experienced the death of a child, and it was just like these high highs and these low lows of the human experience and everything in between. And it was so overwhelming, but it felt like I was trapped inside of hell, because the only things that were really sticking out were the really intense, bad feelings. I started to experience my parents' suicide from their perspective, like through their actual eyeballs, driving to the pharmacy to pick up the prescription, going back to the house, writing the notes, taking the pills, the whole thing. And then I experienced the pain from my perspective as a grieving daughter. And I felt like I was drowning in an ocean of anguish. Like every cell on my body was covered in static and spikes. And yeah, it was just so insanely painful. And I couldn't really piece together what was happening because I didn't believe in any kind of afterlife. I was a militant atheist before my experience. So I just thought, oh, I must have died because I can see my parents and I know that they're dead. And this is what death is. And man, it sucks. It's way worse than I thought. I thought it was just nothing. This is terrible. Then I started to hear my father's voice, and he was saying, "You are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe." And he was just chanting it over and over and over again. And I trusted his voice, and so I followed it. And that's when I landed in the light. And that experience was much different than this kind of hellish experience that I had started with, because now I was in like unconditional love and peace and joy and serenity. And it felt like this beautiful reunion. It felt like I was finally home, not like the home where all your stuff is. Like I was actually home. I was whole. My whole life, I felt like every experience in my life was fracturing me into these tiny shards of glass. And when I entered the light, that was the glue that fused me together and made me into this beautiful mosaic, a work of art. In the first part of my experience, I could perceive thousands of other souls around me. And there was a commander in the center. Like the language that I have for it is that I was part of this big spiritual army, and we were getting ready for our jump mission to Earth. And the commander was giving us, the details of our mission. And you can call that Commander Christ or Krishna or Buddha or higher consciousness. I think it's kind of all the same thing, but it was just this beam of light that was obviously very wise, very loving, a feeling of home. And the commander was telling us that this is the most exciting time to be on Earth, and we're the bravest souls in existence because we've all volunteered to come to Earth for the ascension of consciousness. There's transformation of thought happening on Earth, and we're here for it. And all of the souls are like, yeah, everybody's like just super stoked and all lit up. And I don't really know what's going on, but like, I'm there for it. I'm like, okay, say more. And my awareness shifts over to another scene, and I find myself in front of a table of beings. And they didn't tell me who they were, but they didn't have to, because I just innately knew that they were people in charge. I don't know if they were just in charge of me or if they're in charge of everybody, or they were sitting at this really crappy plastic banquet hall table, just like a collapsible, foldable table. Like no budget was spent on the decor inside of the scene at all. But they did have this gigantic, beautiful, ornate book, this big golden book. And they were thumbing through it, and they're looking at me and looking at the book, and they're going, okay, it's good to see you. You're not meant to stay here. You're only here for information. And I'm like looking all around me like, you guys must have me confused with somebody else, because I don't know where I am, but I am definitely staying. This place feels awesome. I love it. The place I just came from, not awesome. This, yes. And they just kept thumbing through the book. Nope, just information. My awareness shifts to another scene, and I find myself with this man, and he's wearing everything kind of looked like a video game in my experience. I don't know if that's because of the generation that I'm born in, or because we're living in a simulation, or some combination of both of those things. But it felt like I shifted scenes to another part of the video game, and there was this guy, like this NPC. He was wearing a plaid blazer and a fedora, and he had this big empty grocery cart. And he said, okay, let's go pick your life. And so he starts taking me through this grocery store, and lining the walls of the grocery store aisles were these gigantic cereal boxes. And every cereal box had a life experience on it. And I was like supermarket sweep style. I'm like running up and down the aisles. I'm grabbing everything as if I get a prize at the end for getting the most stuff. I mean, just the densest, like darkest, grossest kind of human experiences, like homelessness and poverty and addiction and prostitution and degradation and dereliction and picking the family that I was going to be born into. And then I saw this cereal box. It was like a variety pack of sexual trauma. I'm like, give me the whole thing. I'll take them all. And it's interesting because the one part of this experience that I really like to talk about is that I picked this box that said childhood sexual trauma on it. Why would a soul pick that? I don't have a great answer for it, but I have this deep innate knowing that I did. And as I picked the cereal box, this little orb of light came out with the box. And that was the soul of the man who molested me when I was a small child. And we came orb to orb with each other, and we came into a contract because we loved each other so much. Again, like my human mind cannot comprehend, if this soul loves me, why would they do this to me? But I just have this spiritual knowledge, So like when I'm seeing this scene and I'm coming into contract, and now it feels like there's shackles that have been lifted off of me. 2 tons of bondage has been released from my soul. I'm not a victim to my circumstance. I'm a divine co-creator of my experience. That information is invaluable. And I feel like, I'm completely weightless. Like I'm a ping pong ball, just like going around all of eternity, like so excited, zipping around. I find myself back in front of the table of beings, and I'm on my knees in gratitude, my metaphorical knees, because there's no actual body there, but I'm just crying out. And I'm like, this is so amazing. I feel so blessed to know this. This changes everything about my whole life. Thank you so much. I'm still not going to go back to Earth because that place is kind of a dumpster fire, but I am so happy to know that this is what the whole thing is about. And they were just, shaking their head like, no, you are going back. And I transformed into a small child, and I was banging my hands and my feet on the ground. I will not go back. You cannot make me go back. I said, you don't actually tell us what Earth is like. And this is not fair. And they said, you say that every time that you come back here. You're always saying that you don't know, but you do know. You just can't remember. And I was like, well, no, I can't do it. Like, the body that I just came from, this girl's life, it's insane. There's no way. And I could see my body outside of myself, and I was naked on my bathroom floor, overdosed. And I said, look at her. Like, she's a mess. She's broken. And there is no amount of healing that will fix that. And they said, okay, well, if you don't go back into that body, then we'll show you the baby that you'll be born into. And again, it shifted to a video game-like scene. And like these 3 little avatar babies came up, and then my awareness focused on one, and she was just slowly rotating, kind of holographic, like green lines of matrix code making her up. And then her stats pop up next to her. And it's like her charisma level, her personality type, the family she's going to be born into, her gender, her ethnicity, her adversity, her mission, her purpose. And she was like taking my life experience card, like the grocery cart went into the scene. And I'm like, oh my God, wait, hold up. These are my options to go back into the broken body that I just came from, or start from zero with all the same life experiences. And then I realized that there was actually added cereal boxes inside the cart because of the family that she was being born into. And I gave up. I said, okay, if these are really my only options, I'm going to go back into the body that I just came from, because I definitely can't start from zero. That's insane. This whole time, I felt like I was being kind of punished, that they were making me come back here. And I guess they could feel that. And they said, listen, the first part of your life was boot camp. Nobody likes boot camp. You're doing 1,000 push-ups. There's, some big angry guy screaming in your face. You got mud all over you. It's raining. You're homesick. It's terrible. You feel alone. But the second part of your life is going to be carrying out the mission. And you're going to have soulmates and kindred spirits and teachers and mentors and communities. And you're going to be living in spiritual awareness. It's going to be so much better. Just trust us. And I was like, I do not trust you guys. You guys suck, right? And I found myself back in my body on my bathroom floor. And I just wrote the whole thing off as drug-induced psychosis. All I knew was that I took a bunch of drugs and then I thought I was talking to God, or I thought I planned my life. Like, it was all just so bizarre and so out of my wheelhouse that I just kept on living the way that I was. I went on prostituting, using drugs, abusing people, stealing, lying. Just that's the life that I was living. And so I just continued to live that life until the universe made it completely impossible for me to keep going that way. And I didn't realize that my experience was a true one until I experienced this spontaneous healing out of heroin withdrawal. Because that was one of the main reasons why I stayed on drugs. I was an opiate addict for 20 years, and the pain of withdrawal was too agonizing to go through. And I had mental addictions to, like so many other drugs. But the heroin is the one that really kept me tethered to it. And I remember I was going through withdrawal, and I was so sick. And I had some sort of mental or spiritual suicide. And I said out loud, man, I'm so sick that I couldn't even kill myself if I wanted to, because I can't even figure out a way to get out of this bed to do it. And then I heard a voice and it told me that I could request what I wanted fixed. And I was in the throes of desperation. I was willing to believe anything. So I was like, okay, strange voice, please help me. I don't want to be physically ill anymore. And they told me to lay back and count backwards from 10. And as I did, these two little men appeared in my mind's eye. And they were wearing these white lab coats. They had these bulbous noses. And these little lawnmowers manifested in front of them. And they took off in separate directions. And they started walking through every crevice of my mind. And as they did, I felt these intense hot tingles start to take over the whole crown of my head. And then there was a plunger that went onto the top of my head. And as it plunged down and came back up, I was instantaneously healed out of day 3 of withdrawal. I mean, that's the day when you're sick all over yourself from both ends. Your blood feels like lava. Your bones feel like campfire logs. Your skin feels like broken glass. And then all of a sudden, I was completely well and healed and fine. And I threw myself on the ground and I'm crying out to a God that I do not believe in. And I'm saying, how could this be happening to me? I don't believe in you. I don't believe in this. You could not have picked a more unworthy subject to bestow this kind of grace on. And just for the contrast, before my experience, I was an atheist, a prostitute, a drug addict, an orphan to suicide, a liar, a manipulator, a thief, a racist, a rapist. I was a person who did insanely harmful things to tons of other people. And here I was bestowed with grace and love of the divine. And it just didn't make any sense to me. And as I'm saying to them, I'm not worthy of this. I'm not worthy of this. They're saying back to me, but you're worthy of all the love in the universe. You're worthy of all the love in the universe.
Quick break real quick to just say that I really, really hope you are enjoying this episode. And if you are, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe below so you can start seeing more of these wonderful episodes that will be out every Friday. Thank you.
And I didn't believe it, but after that experience, I kind of thought that maybe I was Jesus, because I was like, whoa. Okay, I have the ability to heal. This is insane. Does anybody else know that you can do this? And so I didn't have any way to understand what was happening to me. I just thought that I was God. And so I went out on the New York City subway system and I was proselytizing and evangelizing and laying my hands on homeless drug addicts and telling them that I had the power to heal them. It was crazy. But one day I was on a train and there was nobody in the train car, and it was the middle of the day, which is really weird in New York City because, we got 9 million people here. And the train stopped, the doors opened, and this man stepped inside, and he sat directly across from me, even though the whole train car was empty. And around his neck was this big blinged out emblem for a 12-step fellowship. And I heard this voice in my head, and it said, "That's your path. Follow him to a meeting." And so I asked this strange man on the train if he happened to be going to a meeting, and guess what? He was on his way, and he took me with him. And the next day I went to another meeting after that. And, I didn't look the way that I look now when this was all happening. At the end of the road, I was really messed up. Like my skin was gray. My eyes were dead. I was missing most of my teeth. These are paid for. And I was just like really, really in bad shape. I had these huge holes all over my face and my arms because every time that I got high, I thought that bugs were living inside of me. And so I would pick myself and cut myself trying to get the bugs out of me. So I walked into this one meeting and they could tell that I was new because it was painfully obvious that I was new. And this woman grabbed me as I walked through the door and she hugged me so tight. And I hadn't been touched in a loving way in a really long time. And so it kind of made me grossed out. I sort of recoiled back a little bit. But then she leaned in and she whispered in my ear and she said, "You are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe." And so I could no longer deny that my experience was a real one because now I had an actual tangible person touching me and saying the same words that I kept hearing over and over again through all of these invisible experiences, things that I couldn't prove were happening to me. Now I have some proof. And my life just started to unfold from there. I went into a long-term rehab. I got clean off of drugs and alcohol. I started to heal all of the trauma that I had endured and I started to heal and make universal amends for all the harm that I had caused to other people. And my life really transformed a lot.
When it comes to your parents, how did you feel before? And then once you realized everything you experienced was true, how did you feel about the passing of them after?
Yeah. So my dad is my number one spirit guide. He's always with me over my left shoulder. And once I saw this idea of the pre-birth planning, it was really hard to hold resentments or to hold any sort of ill feelings anymore. When my parents first died, I know that a lot of people who experience loss from suicide, they feel really guilty. They're like, what could I have done? I've been to, hundreds of suicide support groups in my life. And people are always saying, I could have done something. I could have done more. How did I not know that it was going to happen? And I never felt guilty. And I actually felt really guilty about not feeling guilty. But my parents were burdens. They were physical, financial, emotional burdens to me. Through this healing process, that grief didn't go away. I had been medicating and sedating it with drugs for 11 years. That's how the length in time between when my parents died and my spiritual experience. And I had never felt the grief. And it came at me like a freight train. When I finally let go of drugs, it was all sitting there waiting for me. And there were days where I felt like I was going to die, like I wouldn't be able to breathe. But I could always feel their energy around me. But I didn't know if I was going schizophrenic or like if this was really happening to me. There were so many question marks inside my head because this was not part of my life at all. And so one day I asked my dad, because it really felt like he was talking to me all the time. And I was like, okay, Dad, if it's really you, I'm going to need a sign. I need some evidence. And the first thing that popped into my head was a fox. And I said, okay, Dad, if it's really you, send me a fox. And the next day I was at TJ Maxx. I don't know if you've ever been inside of one of those stores, right? It's like a bomb went off in there. It's like, it's chaotic. Like the underwear in the kitchen section, there's shoes in the bra part, like it's nuts in there. So your eyes can't really focus on one thing because it's so chaotic. And I was in line waiting to pay for, arms full of garbage that I probably didn't need. And on the end cap, there was this discarded item and it was a book. And the book was called Amazing Dads. And it was a picture of a daddy fox and a baby fox. And so I just knew that it was him. So, my idea about death today is very different because I know that they're still around us, but I also know that the human, this body that I'm inside of, demands to feel the feelings that it came here to feel. So just because I had a spiritual experience doesn't mean that I don't experience grief. I absolutely do. I have like a deeper understanding of it that I can pull on in really chaotic moments, but my human wants to experience grief because it's unexpressed love, or, it's memory, it's fondness. But I know that our loved ones are still with us 100%, and they're guiding us from the other side.
That sign is so specific.
I know.
There's no way it was not him.
No way.
No way. I had a very similar one. I'm going to tell you real quick because I just really want to tell you. Okay. So my mom died from being an alcoholic, and I did feel a lot of guilt and still do, thinking I could have done something different. And she was suicidal beforehand, before she actually died of that addiction. But on the anniversary of the year of her passing, I went to estate sales because she loved them and I was trying to honor her. And we had made these bracelets, the bracelets with the letters that are coming back from like our childhood. Okay, so they both said, I love you. I made one for her. She made one for me. At this estate sale, there was a bead kit. The design they had on the outside was 2 bracelets that said, I love you, and then a middle bracelet that said my mom's name.
No, what? That is crazy.
I know.
Wow, they're really with us. And you know what? Sometimes the signs can be terrifying. Like that would have freaked me out. I would have ran away.
Well, I bought the bead set and I brought it home. I didn't see her name till I got home.
Oh my God.
I only saw the I love yous and that was all I needed.
Yeah.
And so I brought it home and showed my boyfriend and he was like, did you not see Lisa in the middle? And I was like, what the?
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so incredible. One time I was walking down the street. This is like before the Fox sign and before rehab. And, there was many months that I was just very confused, thinking that I was walking around like I was dead. And I came upon this box and it had my mom's favorite lotion in it and a pair of aviator sunglasses. And my dad always wore those. And I was like, this is too weird that both of these things are inside of the same box. That's nuts. And, I think I just wasn't aware. I wasn't looking for signs. So if you're not looking for signs, you're never going to see them.
But I feel like when you're open and available,
yes,
they constantly tell you you're supported by them.
Absolutely. Like, I live in New York City. And so if I see a feather on the ground, I'm like, oh my God, it's an angel. It's one of my loved ones. They're with me. And my boyfriend's like, no, that's a dirty New York pigeon feather. That's disgusting. Don't go near that. But for me, it's a spiritual sign. And, that's all about perspective. So like when you're in the midst of grief and you're desperate for connection or a sign, like this open-mindedness that you just talked about, that's the ticket. That's the ticket to any kind of healing, is just to remain open-minded.
Yep. I do agree with that.
Yeah.
So do you think, because we pick our lives and that's what you experienced as well whenever you had your experience, right? So you believe that your parents picked the lives that they had and knew that was how their life was going to end?
So I don't think that people specifically pick suicide as an end point. I do think that people decide to pick very challenging, contrasted lives, but always with the dual experience of it. So like for me, in my grocery cart, there was the life experience of addiction, but there was also a cereal box for the life experience of recovery. And it's really up to us to exercise our free will here to decide when you're finished eating one box of cereal and you're ready to go into the next box of cereal. Because I was eating out of that empty box for a long time. I could have gotten onto my recovery journey way sooner. The first time I ever went to rehab, I was 18 years old. And I could have experienced a lot of other things inside that cart at a much younger age, but I kept taking my self-will back and not going into, my higher self, my spirit, like the divine's plan for me, which was to transform. And so I think the same things for people who have, like very dark, dense experiences, people who experience depression. I believe that they're meant to overcome and help other people with that. And sometimes we don't complete things in this lifetime. And that's okay because we live in a state of infinity. There's nothing to do in heaven, right? Like we go back to heaven. We're like, God, this is so boring. It's like so loving here. Ugh, I need some contrast. How do I know how loving it is here unless I experience duality? And so we're always coming back here all the time. But I do think that there's a lot of life lessons that we don't get while we're here because we just don't have the awareness. It's nobody's fault, just like nobody's really teaching it. If we grew up in a different culture, maybe we'd have more awareness of it. But like we live in America and it's just like grind, go, rinse, repeat. And so we're really disconnected from spirit. But I do think that people do choose their life experiences. Now, this is not information to be weaponized. Like if a person loses a child, I'm not going to go up to them and be like, well, you planned it before you got here. Get over it. This is something that's information for integration. Like when your pain becomes too intense, exercise the open-mindedness to think of this. Because for me, the idea of pre-birth planning gives me spiritual autonomy. I'm not a victim to this world that I see. I am a co-creator. And that awareness feels better for me.
And it's empowering.
It is.
It's more like I wouldn't have picked these struggles if I couldn't overcome them.
Exactly.
I do agree with that. And sometimes with my mom, I remember the day she died, I was like, we weren't learning. And my boyfriend was like, what? And I was like, we were doing the same pattern. We weren't learning and it wasn't fulfilling her. She wasn't moving forward. Because I look at life kind of like a game. She didn't have to choose game over then, but I do feel like she chose to leave when she left.
I was just going to say, like, addiction is such a bitch. Because it's basically like this big boss in the video game of life. And addiction is like this mud over your avatar. It's like this dirty sort of sheet that's like completely weighted. And it seems like it's so hard to take it off because it is. It's really hard to take off this shadow of addiction. You need other people. And the thing about being immersed in addiction is that like it isolates people, like even from their loved ones, definitely from other people, and most certainly from help because it wants to thrive, but it is a really challenging life lesson. And, not everybody gets it in this lifetime, but I guarantee you they will in the next, or they have in a previous. And it definitely is a more challenging level of the game, for sure.
When you heard your dad's voice, did you, besides hearing your dad's voice, did you have contact with your parents in that experience?
So, it was all sort of meshed together. Like when I was experiencing their suicide, it felt like I was them. And so I was like, wait, what is, now later in integration, I'm like, what is consciousness? Am I them? Are they me? Are we actually one? Is that why it felt that way? I have tons of contact with my dad now. For a long time, it was really hard for me to connect with my mom. But I think that was my own sort of resentment that I had to break through. It wasn't that she wasn't willing to communicate with me. It was just that I still had a lot of really hurt feelings about not having a mom anymore. It was... it was a lot to just like be growing up and not have that person in my life. And I was also kind of grieving the fact that I never had a mom, like she wasn't a good mom. They're great parents dead. Like they're awesome. They're like the best kind of parents that you could ever want now that they're not in physical form. But, there are challenges in life and they have stories that are much more colorful than mine. They just couldn't see past it, and I feel like their death was a catalyst for my life. Like I don't just heal for me, I heal for them too. And I also think that, like my understanding is that I communicate with my dad through an alternate timeline. So there was a reality where he didn't die. Like we found him and he was still alive and my mom was dead, but he was alive. And then he had a spiritual awakening. He had a near-death experience from his suicide attempt. And so his whole life changed. And so now we can communicate with each other. And this is kind of like a really out there woo-woo sort of idea. But, I believe in alternate realities. We live in infinity. Like there's just so much. There's so many options. It's fun to conceptualize and think about.
There's so many things right here that we can't see.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot going on. So, I do think that when somebody dies, without completing their life lessons, their avatar might just blink out and reset at another point in the game. Like, I know I tried to kill myself a handful of times in my own life, like really seriously twice. And I just woke up in a hospital bed. And I, even like nights when I blacked out from drinking, I would wake up in a hospital bed, and it seemed like that was a checkpoint in the game. I mean, now I see it that way. Then I didn't have that awareness, but just like the avatar blinks out, you go back to the checkpoint and you try to do it over again. But I just kept doing the same thing over and over and over again. And it's those breaking the patterns, what you just said. That's the most important part of the game.
So when you first got there, you were in like a lower frequency, like a hell?
Yeah. I mean, it was the emotions, like those emotions feel like hell, or the things that I had put people through. That's what felt like hell. I don't believe in hell. I only believe in a beautiful, unconditional, loving source of energy that we come from. But my judgment, not God's judgment. God doesn't have any judgment. Okay. I was spontaneously healed. Like, I know God doesn't have any judgment, but my judgment on myself and my decisions and my life and the way that I lived it, that's what hell was for me.
That's what I was about to ask you. When people transition, do you think that it's them putting them in that like hellish state?
I totally do. I mean, the thing is, like, it's very quick too. But, like, I think that Hitler also had like a life review, but Hitler's part of the light as well. Like, we all are. Your abuser, the person that you hate the most, the guy that broke your heart when you were a teenager, like, all of us are just nothing but divine sparks of source. It's the judgment that we put ourselves through that really tether us to those lower emotions.
I do agree with that. Someone else was saying she had a near-death experience and she's a medium. And she was like, Hitler. She said Hitler too. She was like, serial killers, everyone, we are all the same. And that they may have already learned the lesson, so they're here to teach. Like, as shitty as that is, like, they're here to teach something.
Yeah. And again, that's like the idea of spiritual autonomy, right? Like, if I can see the world through that lens, then I don't have to feel victimized by anything going on. Like, I tell my friends who are really into watching the news, and I mean, like, I don't watch the news anymore because it makes you sick. But, like, I know that there's stuff going on, and I can exercise compassion and empathy without being totally immersed in it. But, like, I know that everybody that causes unrest in our collective is a divine spirit, and maybe there'll be some plot twist in this reality show of Earth. I mean, we're really throwing all of the end narratives in the bowl, like, at once. So maybe they'll have a near-death experience or a spiritual awakening. It'll be spontaneous. The whole world will change. And I mean, I really hold vision for that, because I know that transformation is possible. Because if it's possible for me, it's literally possible for anybody.
What advice would you give Betty before you knew all of this information?
Oh my God. Well, I spent a lot of time with my inner parts, like my inner child, my inner teenager, my inner young adult. I honestly don't think that I would change anything. I'm at a point in my life today where I love my life. It's amazing. I've been able to create a life beyond my wildest dreams today. It doesn't mean I'm not perfect. Like, today it's like very energetically crazy. I was just crying right before this. Like, I'm not saying that my life is perfect or anything, and I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm only trying to be better than the person that I used to be. And that bar is set real low. So the rest of my experience is really great. I don't know if I would give her any advice except just to hold on. I mean, she did that anyway. So that's not even really advice that she needed, because you don't really have a choice. But if I had awareness before, my life wouldn't have unfolded the way that it has today. I needed to be in like the darkest of the dark in order to experience the lightest of the light. And I love the contrast that I've been able to experience. I really do. And I just look forward to like continuing in the light. And again, I have defects of character. Like, I have control and judgment issues. Like, I'm not perfect, but for the majority of my day, I can at least end cap it in a state of spiritual awareness.
What advice would you give someone that is having a hard time with their grief?
Yeah, grief is something that demands to be felt, So it's just like any other feeling. It passes and it comes in waves, and sometimes they're tidal waves and sometimes they're just little ripples. And sometimes the ocean is really nice and still, but I would never try to take away someone's emotional process. Like I've heard experience or, it's the second somebody dies, well, they're in a better place. Well, okay, but like, that's not where we're at right now, Susan. Okay. Like I'm trying to process my grief, and it's okay to process your grief. The only thing I would say is like, don't be alone. Like find a grief group, find a good friend. People say ridiculous things when somebody dies. Always, I've been in so many support groups, and people hold on to these stories for decades of time. Like, oh, but my sister said this and that bitch. The only thing that I would say is like, find a support group. When I finally started to feel my feelings without drugs and alcohol, I went to a grief support group. And not only did I grieve the loss of my parents, and I had a boyfriend who had passed away a couple years before I got clean and in recovery, but I was grieving the loss of my last life. And I think that's a big part of the grief process too, is like, you're never going to be the person who had a parent again, or you're never going to be the person who had, insert whoever the person you lost is here. And that requires a level of grief as well, because you are transformed. Not only are they gone, but you are transformed. And you can see it as an opportunity to level up. Like, I think I became a lot stronger after I've processed my grief. And I mean, it still comes up in waves. Like especially around their anniversary and stuff, or like when I hit a big milestone in my life, it can be really challenging because I feel like I don't have them to share it with, even though I have them invisibly to share it with. But sometimes you just want a person, But yeah, anybody going through grief, like find support, reach out to me. I mean, anybody, just somebody to listen, write it out, journal, use some tools that are healthy. Cause I know how easy it is to turn to alcohol and drugs and like pop a pill and say, oh, I'll deal with this feeling later. But you're just prolonging the pain.
And it is so isolating.
Yeah.
Like as much as you want to be around people, I just wanted to be around no one.
Totally.
I felt like no one understood, and their world's still going.
Exactly. My world has stopped and yours is going. And how is that possible?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Betty, what other comments or thoughts do you have to share?
Well, the only thing that I'll say is that your thoughts really shape your reality. I kept affirming things in the last version of my life. Like, I hate my life. I'm impoverished. I have to do devious things to make money. The earth sucks, or whatever my thoughts were. And my reality was actually reflecting what my internal thoughts were. I'm a victim. That was a big one of my thoughts before. Today I have different thoughts, and I've healed all the underlying wounds. So as I affirm new things in my life, like, I'm an abundant individual. I have a beautiful home. I have a wonderful spiritual community in my life. Like, I love my life. My new reality reflects that, because I've taken a lot of time to heal all of these wounds inside of me, grief being one of the main ones as well. And because I've done that, I've been able to construct such a beautiful life for myself. I just want to say that if anybody is interested in reaching out, if you need support, my website is buddhabetty.com. It's a play on words. I'm not actually a Buddha. Not yet. And I'd love to connect. Like, I have a spiritual community. We meet online once a week, and we just share about, weird esoteric stuff or just what's going on in our regular lives. But it's a good place of supportive people, and I'd love to welcome you into it. So
I love that. I was going to ask if you wanted to share where people could find you, so that was perfect. Betty, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it so much. You are so great to talk to, and your experiences and everything you had to say it was very helpful for me right now. So I appreciate that a lot.
I'm so glad. Thanks for this space, Libby.
Thank you so much for watching Lost and Found. If you like this episode, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe below. There will be new episodes every Friday. And if nothing else, just remember that grief is really, really hard. You don't have to do it alone. And I love you. And until next time.